Today, we're celebrating American Independence Day. To the 54% of my viewers from the United States, happy 4th of July. To the 5.7% of my viewers who are from the UK, no hard feelings, right?
I just said, yes, man, right away, anything.
All right, today we're gonna go full-on American. We're gonna make bourbon with some special ingredients from the US. We're gonna use some red cornmeal, specifically Bloody Butcher, white cornmeal, I don't have an ear of corn for that, and we're gonna use some blue cornmeal. So we're doing the colors of the American flag, red, white, and blue corn, in the bourbon. You can't get more American than that. And the idea for the red, white, and blue corn actually came from my buddy Ken, who runs Barrel Char Wood Products. This guy. Barrel Char Wood Products is the sponsor for today's video, and he generously supplied all the ingredients that we're using today, including the wood that we're going to be using when we get it all done. I've been using Barrel Char Wood Products to age all of my spirits for years now, so I trust the quality that I get from Ken, and that means that I can fully recommend his products to you guys. Ken personally sources, mills, and toasts all the wood himself, so I know the quality is really good and it always produces excellent results for me. He's got everything from barrel charred American white oak staves to exotics like this Brazilian Amburana wood. It smells like cookies. So if you need to stock up on your liquor aging supplies, check out the link for his Etsy store down in the video description. All right, so bourbon is one of those kind of proprietary things, like it's exclusively American. Champagne can only come from Champagne, France, and one of the rules about bourbon is that it can only come from America. The whole Kentucky thing, that's a myth. It can come from anywhere inside the United States, but it's got to be in the US. Another thing is that you've got to have at least 51% of the grain bill as corn. I think we'll be fine. It also needs to be aged in new charred American white oak barrels. We got that, sort of. I'm not aging in barrels because I don't have a barrel. I have some awesome staves that are charred and toasted, and they're gonna do great. And the last two things is bourbon has to be distilled at no higher than 80% ABV, and when you put it on wood, it can't be any higher than 63% ABV, so you gotta proof it down a little bit before you throw it on your wood. So now that we know the parameters that we need to be operating in, let's go ahead and dig into the recipe that I designed. All right, so we've got 3 pounds of our ground Bloody Butcher corn. When I got this stuff, it was just cracked corn, so I went ahead and ground it again in order to get better extraction once we have it in our mash. We also have 3 pounds of malted 2-row barley, and that I also ground myself. That's why it's not perfect. And then we've got 5 pounds of white cornmeal and 5 pounds of blue cornmeal. These came pre-milled. I'm gonna put links for all of these down in the video description. So if you wanna get some, right down in there in the recipe. So the first thing we need to do is get 5 gallons or 20 liters of water in the pot and mix in all of our corn, taking extra care to stir in all the clumps so that we don't have dough balls. If you don't already know, corn is kind of a huge pain in the ass to work with. We need to cook it at like boiling point or pretty close to it in order to gelatinize the starch molecules in this corn so that they can be accessed by the enzymes that we're going to use later on to break them into sugars. The problem is, as we approach that gelatinization temperature in this pot of water, it kind of looks like a really thin blueberry milkshake. So it's not that big a deal right now, but as it continues to heat, those starch molecules are going to swell up so much that this is almost impossible to stir. So to get around that, a lot of times people will throw in a couple of handfuls of malted barley, but the enzymes in malted barley can only survive up to about 170 degrees Fahrenheit. After that, they denature, they stop working. We've got another 40 degrees to keep heating up Fahrenheit, so they're not going to be that much help, but we can use something like this, like liquid enzymes. The only reason why I have this stuff is because Ken was trying it out for one of his own experiments, and he was like, hey, you want to give it a shot? I'm really interested to see how well it does. But basically, the reason why you would use a liquid enzyme like this is because it's got a much higher working range, up to, on this one, 203 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's almost 100 C. And what that allows you to do is to keep stirring and breaking down those starches before they ever have a chance to turn into concrete, so that you can actually get some really good gelatinization on every granule that's in your kettle. And this stuff is pretty potent. You only need like 3 teaspoons for 100 pounds of grain. So that means for our purposes, we need like a half a teaspoon. I want to see how well this stuff actually works. I'm going to put links for this and another one that we're going to use later on down in the video description if you want to check them out. They're not affiliate links or anything like that. I don't get anything from it. If you find another one that you like better, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comments section to let us know. So one thing I wanted to mention, if you've never worked with the Bloody Butcher corn, it does not smell like regular corn. Bloody Butcher actually smells really savory. It kind of smells like fully done salty cornbread. I find that fascinating, so I'm really excited to find out what kind of flavor that's going to impart to the final product. I'm going to go ahead and cook this until it starts to get nasty and thick, and then I'm going to add the enzyme because I want to see how well it does. How big of a reaction are we going to see? So I'll come back to you when we get to that point. So I'm just adding about a half a cap full. Alright, so this sat at over 200 degrees for a solid hour to really gelatinize everything. And as you can see, it's still nice and liquidy. I'm really happy with how this worked. It's super thin. So I've got it cooled down and it's currently at 155 degrees. So it's time to add our barley and the rest of our liquid enzyme to go ahead and get this mashing for an hour. And because corn is such a huge pain in the ass to strain, I'm gonna throw in a few handfuls of these rice hulls. If you've never used them, basically they're just the outside husk of rice grains, and they don't deform, they hold their shape, and they allow liquid to flow through them a lot more easily. So basically you're just increasing the amount of space in between the grains so that when you do go to drain it, it can actually drain a little bit better. I'm going to do another half cap of the Alphazyme SK5. And I've got this one, it's Glucomyl. You use twice as much of this as you do of the other one. This one is good for lower temperature mashing. 145, 155 is going to be its kind of butter zone. But it will keep working as you cool down, even to pitching temperatures. So it's a good idea to go ahead and add this in. For stuff like this, it just increases your mash efficiency a lot. Now we're just going to mix this in and let it mash in the oven for another hour. I melted a hole in my bag. Yay! Get to deal with that later. Alright, so I let this sit and mash overnight in the oven. You don't have to do that. It's usually done after about 90 minutes. Let's go ahead and do a starch test on this and see how it turned out. Alright, so that's fantastic. We got a negative reaction on the iodine, meaning that there's, at least in the clear wort, there's no starch present. Since I don't have a bag big enough to sparge this grain, to hold all the grain and sparge it to get all the residual sugars off, I think I'm going to throw about 1.5 gallons of water into this spent grain here and then re-strain it through my little bag and then pour that in here. So we'll get as much sugar as possible. We'll check the gravity after I get all that done and see where we're at. So now we're aerated and the wort is ready to go. We're just going to throw in some of this daddy yeast, distiller's active dry yeast, and then let it ferment. So the fermentation went perfectly. It fermented down to 0.994, which was excellent. That gave us a final ABV of 10.36% alcohol for the wash. And I was happy that the finished wash actually still had some of that purple color to it. It was purpley brown, because I'm gonna make a beer with those same ingredients here pretty soon. I think I'm gonna do an American lager. I think it was a good idea to strain the wash the way I did. I think that really helped because there was really just a yeast cake down in the bottom, and it was lavender. There was a lavender color yeast cake down at the bottom. It was cool. But there wasn't a lot of cornstarch, which you would normally see with such a heavy amount of corn in the grain bill. So it fermented out in 3 days. So I put the bucket of wash under my pillow, and then when I woke up in the morning, the liquor fairy had brought me a whole bunch of jars. Apparently the liquor fairy ran it in a single pot still run with a thumper, and they put about 1.5 liters of the wash into the thumper so that you can boost the flavor and boost the ABV. So I ended up with almost 2 full liters of White Dog bourbon. It was 74%, and this has been proofed down to about 56. Yeah. But before we get into the tasting, I want to thank these folks right down here, all of my Patreon supporters. You guys are absolutely amazing. I keep getting new ideas from you, and all of your feedback on the polls and getting questions to ask for Brewbird and everything. That stuff is really helping, and I'm so grateful for you guys. Thank you so much. And for anybody out there who's interested in getting some behind the scenes access to the channel, check out my Patreon link down in the video description. So if you do that, thank you so much. And if you're just watching, thank you so much. I love all of you. All right, I am excited because I've never had a bourbon with Bloody Butcher in it. I've never had one with Hopi blue corn in it. And I'm excited to see if I can pick out any interesting flavors from those. So, I mean, I doubt it because my nose and my taste buds aren't as sharp as some people's, but we're gonna give it a shot. As much as you get the sweetness from the white cornmeal, you do get this interesting savory character from the Bloody Butcher. It's really nice. I'm getting like a serious buttery note that was not there in the wash. There was no diacetyl in the wash. Not like a plate of buttered corn, but cornbread with a little bit of butter on it. This is really good. I think this is going to be spectacular when it's aged. It's pretty darn good right now at 56%. It's interesting, you get that savory and a little kind of back of the tongue sweetness. I'm the first one to tell you, I kind of suck at this, at the picking out the flavors and the aromas. But I'm definitely getting more than one kind of corn. I'm getting like a yellow corn kind of aroma, but then something else. And I'm thinking that's the Bloody Butcher. It's a lot of layers and a lot of character to it for being, 80% corn. So when it comes to aging this, I think it's going to end up being a spectacular finished product. For the most part, I'm going to go traditional aging on this. I'm going to let it go for a long time. I've got these 3 vessels, and I think what I want to do is only put wood in 2 of them. And then I have some plans for some other aging technique testing. Let's go ahead and get some wood in these jars. So I've got some charred white American oak, and I'm just going to drop that in my big jar. And I'm going to let this one go for a long time. We might not talk about it until next July 4th. I don't know. I'm going to throw some of this Ambarana wood. This is from Brazil. I will never get tired of that. It's like graham crackers and ginger snaps. It just smells like cookies with a little bit of wood. It's really awesome. So that's going in. right. There we go. And then this last one, we're going to leave this one as a white dog until I can come up with some other testing. This stuff is fantastic as a white dog, so I can't guarantee how much of this is going to be left by the time I get to another test. All right, so that is the American Independence Day 4th of July bourbon. I highly recommend you try this recipe. I've got links for everything down in the video description and the full recipe for how I did it. And also there's a link down there for barrel charwood if you want to get some of this oak, some of this amberana wood, or anything else that Ken's got. All right. If you learned anything, if you thought this was interesting, do me a favor and hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, you probably should, because I've got all kinds of cool stuff coming up. Hit the subscribe button right down there and the little bell icon right next to it so that you can get notified when I do post new videos. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, go ahead and post them in the comments section down below. Thanks for watching. Talk at you later.